Alright, just trying to get myself set up. Okay, hi. Um, hi. I know this video was supposed to have been posted. Well, this stream was supposed to have been done yesterday. Um, so I was watching a movie that my little cousin pretty much demanded that I watch, and I finally just sat down and watched it. She wanted me to watch Talk to Me, and that movie got me. It got me to the point where I just forgot about the stream. I was just kept thinking about the movie and eventually just fell asleep. So I forgot to do the stream, but I didn't forget today. Even though usually I don't do Wednesdays because Wednesdays are my days where I'm supposed to like getting ready for work, and I just got done watching Sinners again. I watched it in theaters, but yeah. So a little story recap. Um, we left off with um, Wendy finding out that Skipper, one of the Lost Boys, is actually a girl, and at the orphanage she had saw that Peter Pan was only taking boys, so because she was very much ignored, um, she just changed her gender on her paperwork and was taken by Peter Pan. However, because she's growing up and she is a she is a girl, she doesn't want Peter Pan to find out that she is in fact a boy, especially since he is pretty mad at Skipper still. With that in mind, Wendy and Tinkerbell went to Mermaid Lagoon, where the Lost Boy said that that's where Peter Pan usually goes when he's upset, and he finds comfort in the mermaids. Turns out he was there 4 days ago, and the mermaids can talk. That's the part that gets me. They can talk because in the movie they did not talk, but they talk. I'm still. I don't know how I feel about that. Anyway, um, they are now, and where we left off, they were leaving Mermaid Lagoon after finally getting some answers out of the mermaids, which, for sea creatures, they're very airheaded. But tonight we are going to start off with. Sorry, that's my wrong one. There it is. There it is. Okay. We're going to start off with chapter 16.5. I'm going to try and watch my time and get to chapter 18 because I want to go to bed on time. I say that, and yeah, I never go to bed on time. At least I'm ready. Alright, chapter 16.5. I thought you said you liked my. Wait a minute. Hold on. Chapter 16.5. Meanwhile, on the high seas. I thought you said my idea was a good one, Mr. Smith said doubtfully from behind Hook. I thought you was going to use the shadow like an extant or compass or whatnot to find Peter. The captain stood rammed, not bad, straight at the wheel. His lower jaw jutted out. This was one thing you could certainly say about Captain Hook. When he was moved by a plan, his own, or an emotion, his own, or a crazy idea suggested by another member of the crew, somehow reinterpreted as his own. His bravery and clarity of purpose surpassed those of the finest storybook hero. His antics might not have made a lot of sense to an outside observer, but he carried them through with the enthusiasm and fearlessness of a toddler who didn't know any better, which he practically is. Right now, the outside observers were his own crew, who pretended to do their task while visibly unnerved by the sea changes going on around them. Most gave up and just twiddled their thumbs or daggers, trying to listen in on the captain's plans. Yes, but the bloody thing's a shadow, Hook said with great disdain. I can't put a gold needle in its mouth and align it with north now, can I? I need someone else's expertise on the matter, outside direction on how to filter its essence into compass form. Yes, Captain, I see that, but Smee swallowed. Madam Moria? I instantly forgot the voice I did for you. I don't I know. Oh, that's me. Screw it. I don't see anyone here with a better idea, Hook said with a sniff. I don't like the idea too much myself. He said myself. But there's time a villain has got to rely on a little help from his people. His community, as it were. Exchange some trade secrets. My expertise is piracy, not black magic. Moria is conjured out of the darkest fears stupid little children have of old women and their unknown habits. She'll help, out of professional courtesy, if nothing else. Unknown habits? Zane protested, overhearing. Everyone's got a everyone's everyone normal's got a granny. Smacks of ageism, isn't it? Doesn't it? Not if it's specifically the unknown habits, Major Thomas suggested. For years, I didn't know that the foul-smelling cack me nanny smeared on her rump every morning was anti-wrinkle cream. That it was oil decocted from the placentae of unborn babes, so she could fly or somewhat. What was the recipe? The Duke asked, trying to sound casual. Oh, shut up, you lot. I said stupid children, didn't I? Hook roared. Who knows why they fear their old neighbors and not rabid dogs or... I'm not even going to attempt to try to say stuff below. What the heck? Staphylococcus? Or stepping out in front of oncoming carriages. Now shut up and let me remember the passage over South Sucker Reef. This is, I'm sorry, Soul Sucker Reef. The heavens turned murky and thin, in patches between strangely resinous clouds. The sky was black with cold, unglittering stars. Despite its despite it being late afternoon, a wind picked up, so hideous and unclean that even the most wretched pirates shuddered and held their noses against the foul stench. Polluted thoughts came with it, and not the unusual familiar nightmares of witchery, like ravens and cats and curses. These were these were presages of end times, battlefields crawling with things no longer quite human. the dead and decaying in piles on the ground to every horizon, the wretched howling of the last person alive. Far too quickly for some on board, a rocky island emerged out of the mist. Hook muttered, "Port, port, starboard a bit, keep it steady," to himself, his eyes as cold and unblinking as the alien stars above. There was a dock on the otherwise empty island. Despite the crew's desperate pleas to weigh anchor farther out, the captain refused. "You, none of you, would still be here when I was done," was all he would say, without his usual bluster and speechifying. The truth was enough to silence the men. Ever so carefully, Hook piloted the ship, and strange apparitions appeared on the dock. Their mouths dripped to the planks, and they flickered in and out of view at irregular intervals. But they caught the ropes thrown down and tied them neatly to solid-seeming cleats. Soon, for better or worse, the boat was fastened tightly and in no danger of drifting off. Captain Hook seemed almost jolly as he put on his hat and adjusted his mustache. "You're with me, Smee." "I was really hoping you wouldn't say that," the other pirate murmured sadly, pulling his own cap down over his ears. The captain grabbed a jaunty walking stick and sauntered down the gangplank. "I don't think I need to tell you fellows no shore leave here today," he called over his shoulder. The island was much more than a single rocky promontory rising out of the sea like the longest claw of a dying ant. What is up with these words, bro? Of a dying antediluvian beast, I guess. On the tip of that claw was Madame Maria's hut. "What kind of waif lives on an island?" Smee muttered as they left the dock and clambered up the narrow path that spiraled around the island, allowing the witch several perfect views of approaching visitors. "Shouldn't she be in a nice, snug little house in the woods somewhere, luring children in with candy and then eating them?" "This is the oldest kind of witch, Mrs. Smee. If you had any education at all, you would know all about the Greeks and their very, very scary witches." Pause. How the heck does Captain Hook know about Greeks, period? How? How? Anyway, back to the story. "Guess I'm glad I never got a proper education then," the other pirate said, looking around woefully. At the top of the promontory, I guess, they walked across a precarious bridge to the hut, a gnarled mass of driftwood, strange black vines, and what looked like seaweed or possibly human flesh stretched taut for a roof. Hook took off his hat and rapped. "Madame Maria, it's Hook, come to visit." The door opened of its own accord after a suitably spooky pause. Jesus. Inside of the hut was, of course, much larger than the outside, but so dark and cramped and filled with indistinguishable things that the effect was much less grand than it could have been. A primitive fire burned coils on the floor without a ring or anything around to contain it. Tending the cauldron suspended above the flames was a bent-over woman. Her skin was thick with grease and soot. Great ropey locks of hair were mound on her head, until they practically doubled her height. When she turned to fix a pair of milky eyes on her guest, Smee's heart almost stopped. "Ah, Hook! Such a long time!" she cried, surprisingly merry. "How's my favorite handsome pirate captain?" "Very well, Maria, very well," Hook said politely, leaning over and submitting himself to a kiss on the cheek that left a gray lip print. Sorry. "You want something, don't you?" she said with a sigh. "You never come to visit." "Ah, well, what's to be expected among the evil? Polite behavior, niceties." She cackled and slipped from the ladle she held. "I'm just cooking up a nice bowl of baby bits. Care for a bowl?" "None for me, thank you," Hook said, trying to sound regretful. "Maybe Mr. Smee would." "Who?" "Oh!" The witch looked up and made a big deal of winking at the first mate, although not quite in the right direction, perhaps because of her cataracts. "What do you want, then?" "May as well get right down to business, eh?" "Well, I'm having some shadow issues," Hook admitted with a sigh, sitting down in a comfy red velvet chair whose hard parts were carved from human femurs and tibias. "Shadows? Tricky business for mortals." "Yes, well, it's Peter Pan's shadow, so trickier than most, I would say." "Peter Pan? You're still chasing after that wretch?" "Oh, well, some things never change in Neverland." "It is what it is." Hill crossed one leg over the other and sniffed with great dignity. "But I had this rather brilliant idea that I could use his shadow, currently in my possession, to lead me to him, like a compass." Mrs. Smee nodded eagerly, then frowned, perhaps remembering where the idea had come from originally. Hook was careful not to look at him. The witch sucked her tooth, stirring the soup thoughtfully. "Not the compass. There's problems with enchanting the shadow down so small, for long periods of time, especially if you don't plan on staying near the equator. No, a compass won't work. You need something more human size, like panopticon." I think I said that right. "What's that?" Hook asked eagerly. "I think it's the thing you're looking for. The engineering of it escapes me. Was mentioned in one of me books over there." The witch gestured to a shelf which had its things on it, which had on it things that made even Hook squirm. Moldering jars of foul-smelling ointments, shining black plants that looked more liquid than fiber, clutches protecting half-flesh skeletons that could have been human or reptile, and which moved a little when not looked at directly. I'm sorry, there was a spider crawling on my wall. I'm trying to see if I see it again so I can kill it. I don't see it. Alright. Also, a set of musty black-bound books, some of which had blinking eyeballs set in their covers. "Splendid! Splendid!" Hook said enthusiastically, concealing his disgust. "How much for the lot?" "Well, if you were a good fellow, I say free. The chaos and pain released by your attempting to use them would certainly make it worthwhile," the witch said with a smile that wasn't entirely unkind. "But since you're one of us, I have to charge. Let me see." She waddled back and forth in front of her fire, a giddy, almost childlike look on her face as she tapped her tooth in thought. Hook fidgeted. Smee whispered, "You don't think she'll make us get her more babies, do you, Captain?" "Even I have my limits," Hook whispered back. The witch whirled around, and both men jumped like boys caught by a teacher. "All around my old ship," she declared happily. "Not the grog, the real pure stuff. Also any cones of sugar, and a silk dressing gown." "Absolutely," Hook said in relief. "Whatever you like. It is yours." Maria rubbed her hands together in excitement. Strange oils come off them, but disappeared into dust and smoke before hitting the floor. Smee began to inch toward the exit. "Oh, I haven't had a real drink in years, and their spirits like it too." "And you look like a woman who deserves a nice gown to eat your uh, breakfast in," Hook said politely. The witch cackled. "Oh, the dressing gown is for a bit of a disguise. There's a handsome young merman I rather fancy, and who, I might add, could stand to be taught a lesson or two." "Well, I leave you to your projects," Hood said hastily, standing up. The witch rolled her eyes and spat. "At least I'm honest about my issues. Chasing pan indeed, but your anger at lost youth into violence, I say. Go burn some villages or raid one of the other islands. Become a despot. Keep yourself busy." "I'll just have what you ordered sent up here by a couple of my men, with some extra goodies for you, of course," Hook said, pushing the door open with his rump and bowing out. "Oh, you're too kind. I'll have one of my own men bring you the books once I get what I want. I don't suppose I need to tell you this. There's no way your ship is leaving these waters until you hold up your end of the bargain. And I don't need to tell you that my cannons are aimed at your lovely house on the off chance you don't hold up yours, of course." "Always a pleasure, Hook." The witch grinned and blew him a kiss. "For me as well." The captain tipped his hat before setting it on his head and closing the door behind him. He and Smee stood there for a moment in the dismal half-light of the weird island and its foul vapors, breathing deeply in relief. That that wasn't pleasant, if you don't mind me saying so, Captain," Smee eventually said. "No. But I wonder," Hook said thoughtfully. "Maybe what we feel now, that's how people feel when they deal with pirates. I mean, we're frightening, too, aren't we? Killing and looting and looking generally fearsome. Isn't that why heroes always come after us?" "Never thought about that way, Captain," he admitted, scratching under his hat. "I guess that's why you're the captain, Captain. Always thinking the deep thoughts and whatnot." "True," Hook said, nodding. "Too true, Mr. Smee. 'Tis a burden of leadership. You know, I will almost miss her when she's gone, with the rest of Neverland. Poor old witch. Now let's back to the ship. I want to get her the rum and be out of here as soon as we can. And I think it's high time for a bath and a shave. Always feel unclean after dealing with her." "That's the thing. One bath and shave coming right up, Captain Sir," Mr. Smee said happily, and the two brightly colored pirates descended the steep spiral path, the only red and blue and gold things for miles around. Hook's feather bobbed jauntily in the air. He even smiled despite the foul breeze. Soon he would have the shadows showing the way. Peter Pan was as good as gone, along with the rest of Neverland. All right, Chapter 17. Steps. Tinkerbell's globe lit the dark understory of the jungle with a spurredly, if feeble, twinkling. Whatever triumph Wendy had felt upon surviving the mermaids soon dissipated into the dark, moist, enveloping atmosphere. She was walking away from creatures she had dreamed of meeting since she was a very little girl. Thank you, she said aloud eventually. Tinkerbell looked at her. For saving me, Wendy elaborated. Tinkerbell blinked as if she hadn't thought about it. Wendy watched expressions flit over her face as quick and transparent as the wings of a dragonfly or fairy. There was no need for language. The fairy frowned, obviously recalling details of the previous hour. Then an expression of wonder and an unguarded smile appeared. She did save Wendy, didn't she? The smile grew into a rosy grin as she remembered her own heroics. A pleased mouse, a pleased, proud smugness settling over her features. Finally, she looked up at Wendy, as if just remembering that the person she saved was still there, and perhaps that person was someone she didn't want to like. She rolled her eyes and shrugged. No big deal. Well, it meant a lot to me, Wendy said, refusing to let her companion retreat so easily from the conversation. I didn't think, well, I didn't think you were going to come back for me. I had thought you left. For good. The fairy flew up toward Wendy's face, settling inches from her nose. She put her tiny hands on her hips in exasperation. Well, really, how was I supposed to know? You made it quite clear you don't have the fondest feelings for me from the moment we first met. You were boxing me about a bit, remember? She didn't mean to overemphasize her statement, but she couldn't help rubbing her arm where the fairy had pinched her extra viciously. The fairy looked thoughtful. Well, you did. Tinkerbell really was like a child, Wendy decided. Her intelligence and wisdom in the moment were certainly advanced and adult-like, but anything that required reflecting on previous moments or her own past behavior, any consideration for intangible elements like consequences or empathy, was as impossible as the close observation of a distant world. Tinkerbell of early in the day was an entirely different creature from afternoon Tinkerbell, alien and divorced from her. The fairy looked left and right as if trying to figure out a way of Wendy's rather obvious and telling statement. Then she cocked her head as if remembering something, and opened her mouth, waggling a finger at the human girl. I know. I sold Peter's shadow. I put all of Neverland in danger. I deserve your ire, which makes it only more likely that you would abandon me to be drowned by the mermaids, especially if it looked hopeless. Wendy sighed, feeling the heaviness of the last few days fall solidly on her shoulders. All I ever wanted was to be friends with a fairy or a mermaid and go on an adventure. I didn't mean for all of this to happen. I don't know how many times I can apologize, Tinkerbell. Look, I know I said we shouldn't discuss him anymore, but really, ask yourself, why do you like Peter Pan? The fairy looked up, surprised at the apparent change in conversation. Is it because he's different from everyone you would normally spend time with? Is it because he leads you on great adventures? Is it because he draws you out of your pretty, delicate little bedroom and you get to battle pirates with him and do great things? Tinkerbell gave a tiny nod. I like Peter, the idea of Peter, for the exact same reasons. I've always dreamed of going on great adventures, of battling pirates, of exploring caves and finding treasures. Because there are no adventures or pirates in London. Not for girls, anyway. All of the stories I read are about boys and men. Oh, there are a few rare female explorers, but I am not one of them. I need a little help to get going. You know what I mean? I don't seem to be able to escape my own bedroom in London without someone giving me a bit of a push. Peter Pan will come and save me from all of that dreariness. Had I known about you and how you already had a relationship with Peter, a strong and perhaps a rightfully jealous one, I would have been much more careful. But I would still want a Peter, a Peter Pan. I would still want adventure. But I would be in no way to put myself between you and the Peter, your Peter. Tinkerbell frowned as she slowly processed these words. Really, you needn't have hate me, Wendy said, with a wan smile. Could have just said something like, back off, woman, the fair lad is mine. And then we would have shaken on it. Or whatever it is dumb men do when they come to some dumb manly agreement. The fairy's mouth tugged at the side in a snarky smile. She knew exactly what Wendy was talking about. The ridiculousness, the ridiculous justice of a gender prone to extravagation. And then maybe you could have eventually introduced me to some fairy prince, Wendy said lightly with a smile. Just like my mother is always trying to get girls to introduce me to their brothers or cousins or whatever. At this, Tinkerbell frowned and made a little gagging motion, sticking her finger down on her tongue. Now, I suppose there's a reason you spend time with Peter and the Lost Boys, and not males of the fake kind, Wendy said, laughing. Perhaps they are as boring to you as London boys are to me. Anyway, without Peter, or you, I had to find my way here myself. Didn't understand the cost of consequences. I'm getting my adventure, finally, even if it's not exactly the one I wanted. I just wish, I really, really wish we could travel together, more as friends. I'm not your enemy, Tinkerbell. If I had known about you, I would have been your greatest fan. Tinkerbell was silent. For once, her face and body were unreadable, an enigma. Anyway, we should probably get going. Wendy finished, a little lamely. She already felt like she had pulled a real Wendy, talking too much, revealing too much, feeling too much, all in the open. But Tinkerbell seemed frozen in thought, almost as if almost as if once Wendy had got her thinking about things she had never considered before. She could easily give them up like a cat worrying a toy. You should lead, Wendy said politely, since I have no idea where we're going. The fairy tipped her head back and took in the human, as if really looking at her for the first time. She paused for a moment in what appeared to be a new thought, judging by the spark in her eye. What is it? Wendy asked. Tinkerbell opened her mouth widely, very widely, wider than it seemed wider than it seemed should have been possible for such a tiny creature. Wendy couldn't help noticing familiar, almost mermaidish rows of sharp, perfectly white teeth. Was every resident of Neverland equipped with such weapons? Such mouths? How dangerous was this place? I don't know what you... Tinkerbell closed her mouth, then opened it again, widely and pointing at Wendy. You want me to... Wendy asked, opening her own mouth, but not quite as wide as Tinkerbell had. She was a little self-conscious. Mother and father always told her to chew with her mouth closed, of course, and ladies didn't yawn or speak while eating, at least not without hiding behind a properly gloved set of fingers. Oh, I just read that. Yeah, I just yawned. Oh man. Uh. But she opened a little wider, seeing the fairies glowing, seeing the fairies growing impatience and fearing her retribution. Like this? She asked. In answer, the fairy shook her wings and spun, hurling a stream of fairy dust onto Wendy's tongue. Alright, and because this is the last one, I'm going to check it really quick. Okay, so it's a little less than 10 pages, but it is almost time for me to go to bed. Okay. So, oh, sorry, give me a second. Hmm. One, two, six, seven, nine pages. Okay, so this is 17.5. I still got, um, yeah. Alright, so 17.5, and then 18, and then we're gonna stop. Because we are right, well, not right at there, but we are a little more than halfway, just a tiny bit, more than halfway done with the book. Alright, 17.5, Wendy and the Fairies. Finally! What Wendy felt was a spray of something that could only be described as golden, light, everish, slightly dry. Right. I'm sorry. Give me 1 second. Let me put my bookmark here so I don't overread by accident. Alright, cool. Fizzy, like the horrible mineral waters mother sometimes made father take to aid his di- digestion. Lord. But not with a terrible metallic taste. For the brief moment, she could taste anything at all. It was sweet, or no, maybe sour, like lemons. No, not that either. More like sparks from a fire. All too soon it was gone, down her throat or up her nose, or dissipated into her flesh and brain. A wave crashed through her body, starting in her sinuses. She was frozen all over, and then sweating and shuddering. But in the next moment, felt like herself again. What was... Thank you. Why did you... Tinkerbell jingled. Can you understand me? Yes, of course, but what did you just... Wait, what? Just like that. Like nothing at all. Everything the fairy said made sense. Like it had always made sense when taken all together. Her jingles, her wing flutters, her eye movements. A human girl hadn't been able to understand it before. You're dust, Wendy said slowly. Somehow it allows me to understand you, the way everyone else can. Oh, Lord, excuse me. Tinkerbell shrugged and did a slow spiral in the air, apparently now bored with the conversation. She zoomed up to a palm leaf to examine a bug there, something like the unicorn beetles, but with an iridescent rainbow mane that fluttered in the breeze. She jingled quietly and nuzzled it. Well, Well, this makes things a lot easier, Wendy said happily. Did the dust allow her to understand just Tinkerbell, or all fairies? What about all the creatures of Neverland? How long would it last? Did it change other parts of her? Was it poisonous? I think you would have died. I think you would know if it was poisonous right about now. You would know if you just got poisoned by that dang fairy. You would know. If she had been doused with fairy dust to fly, and embedded in fairy dust to hear fairy language, how much more of her was there to infuse with the substance? Would she become, she secretly hoped, a fairy herself? Magical translating dust aside, she also understood, without anyone saying it, that despite this apparent change in their relationship status, the fairy would still not stand for the usual Wendy barrage of questions. They might be on better terms now, but they weren't bosom companions. Not yet, at least. All right, then, Wendy said, patting her dress down and dusting herself off as best she could, while ordering her head around a careful list of questions she could dole out slowly over the course of her time with the fairy. Where do we find these first? Tinkerbell shrugged. Oh, Wendy said, perplexed. But when they said that thing about him going to see the first, you looked like you knew of them. You looked as if you don't mind me saying so. If you don't mind me saying so, worried. Am I worried? About what? Are they dangerous? Tinkerbell swayed this way and that on a whisper soft breeze so faint she might have summoned it on her own wings. The first are the first. The first inhabitants of Neverland. The first spirits of the place. Ancient. They were here before mermaids and pirates and fairies and the dreams of men. They are Neverland. Whatever Neverland was when it was born, we are all a result of them and you. Wendy frowned, considering this. The history of Neverland had never occurred to her as a discrete idea before. Neverland was Neverland, a piece of infinite happiness and adventure, where anything you could imagine was possible. Did theories like geology, the true age of the earth, and Mr. Darwin's evolution hold for imaginary lands? Where did fairies come from? She asked, thinking it was the simplest entry into a complicated subject. The first laugh of a baby, a special baby, so they say. Tinkerbell said wearily. We are here, we appear. Sometimes there are more of us. I awoke under a leaf, curled up like a drop of dew, complete. Tinkerbell. But also we come the usual way. She made a face. But there is a connection between you and the imagination, the minds of human beings, Wendy hazarded. I guess so. When I tell a story about Neverland to my brothers, am I making it up? Or am I just repeating something which my inner mind already knows? A story that has already actually happened in Neverland? Who knows? I don't. Who cares? I don't. But we're talking about the nature of your existence, your world's existence. Doesn't that make you wonder at all? I am. You are. Everything else is talk. Tinkerbell jingled a little impatiently. What's important is getting Peter's shadow back and figuring out how Captain Hook plans to destroy Neverland. No, of course. You're right, Wendy said, a little distractedly. She did not really agree. Details mattered to her. Which hand of Hook's Peter actually cut off, for instance? How many masts the Jolly Roger had? The precise workings of an entire world, the rules by which it existed. Well, Besides soothing her constant tumbling mind, knowledge was power. The more she knew about Neverland, the safer she was, and the more successful their quest would be. But just what do they look like? The first, I mean. They do not look like men, or fairies, or mermaids, or pirates, or animals, or insects, or fish, or plants. They look like nothing and everything at once. Wendy sighed. All right, I see. But if they're so dangerous and unknowable, why do you think Peter went to see them? The fairy looked disgusted at yet another question, but then she thought about it. Maybe he thought they could get him a new one. A new... Shut up. Can the first do that? They are Neverland. Why did I give you the dust to hear if you won't listen? Okay, Miss Sassy. All right. But would they do it? At this, the fairy looked troubled. They don't talk or listen to reason, or they do things for the unknowable reasons, big things, scary things. So they are opaque and random, powerful and whimsical, unknowable, inscrutable, and unpredictable, like an Old Testament sort of God. Tinkerbell looked at her for a long moment. Sure. Lovely. I suppose we must go then and chase Peter Pan together to the Desmond, I think, of these terrifying gods of Neverland. How do we go about finding them? Their place is being Their place of being is never constant for very long. We will need to ask where they were seen last. Oh, dangerous whimsical gods on something like the Flying Dutchman. This gets better and better. So, how do we find out where they are? I have been asking the small friends, the many-legged companions of the woods, but I think we shall need to seek fairy help. The ooh that Wendy couldn't quite suppress in her throat had to be caught and killed physically with her hands. She clapped them over her mouth and held tightly while the sound tried to come out. Tinkerbell did something that was like an eye roll, stopped midway, with a tiny smile thrown in for good measure. Unfortunately, this is not the best place to do it. We're at the edge of the Cornwall Range, and in pernicious, I swear this is what it says, pernicious forest, and things live here that feast upon fairy kind. We tend to avoid this area, and we certainly don't draw attention to ourselves while here by gathering in groups. But hopefully, there will be one or two of my kind about, traveling through. Perhaps predators. My brethren avoid human contact. Besides predators, my brethren avoid human contact. Hide somewhere and peep out. Absolutely, Wendy breathed, only a little disappointed not to be involved in actually meeting them. Watching fairies up close was still more fairy contact than she ever had before, even if it didn't seem fair somehow, now that she could understand what they said. She found a clump of shiny, large-leafed leaves and arranged their long canes along her body until her body was hidden from view. There was a nice hole in one of the leaves through which she could spy. The hole was still being worked on by a small friend, a caterpillar with purple scales instead of fur. It looked at Wendy in dubious surprise, or so Wendy assumed. It was hard to tell with his facet but depthless golden eyes. "Excuse me," she whispered. "I'll just be here for a moment." She was unsure if the fairy dust gave her the ability to communicate with otherwise unspeaking Neverland creatures, but the thing did give her a long, hard look before going back to business of chewing and ignoring. Tinkerbell, meanwhile, was drifting with purpose up to the highest leafy branches of the jungle. Her light glowed warmly off the leaves below, the droplets seeping off their thick veins, the sweet sap running down the trunks of the trees. It made the whole clearing look, well, like it was touched by fairies, Wendy thought with a smile. All her life she looked for fairies in more mundane places. Oh man, I feel like I'm getting sick. In more mundane places, experiencing a rush of hope and warmth whenever a scene even playfully imitated the one before her now. Candles at Christmas, fairy lights, and yet fireflies in the park, flickering lamps in tea houses, the sparkling lead glass windows of a sweet shop on winter afternoons when dusk came at 4. A feeble, glowing crisscross of threads on a rotten log her cousin had once shown her out in the country. Foxfire, magical mushrooms. And here it was, for real. Tinkerbell was performing what appeared to be a slow, majestic dance. First she moved to specific points in the air around her, perhaps north, south, east, and west, twirling a little at each stop. Then she flew back in the center and made a strange bowing motion, keeping her tiny feet daintily together and putting her arms out gracefully like a swan. As she completed each movement, fairy dust fell from her wings in glittering, languorous trails, hanging in the air just long enough to form shapes. She started the dance over again, faster this time, and again even faster. Her trails of sparkles almost resolved into a picture, crisscross line constantly flowing down like drips of luminous paint. Wendy felt a bit like John, overwhelmed with desire to try and reduce and explain, thereby translate the magic. But also she felt a lot like Michael, with an almost overwhelming urge to break free from her hiding place and see up close, to feel the sparkles on her nose, to run a hand through the sigils, not for the purpose of destruction, but from a hapless, joyful desire to be a part of it all. Tinkerbell finally stopped, breathing heavily. Wendy held her own breath, and then, out of the darkness, an answering glow. Alright, 1, 2, 3, and 4. Alright, so this is going to be the last one. I'm just going to call this one 18. Chapter 18, The Neverland em- Emperor. Not Emperor, not Emperor, but Emperor, I believe. Like a firefly in the mist, or fish from the darkest deep, the light came bulbing through the jungle gloom. This one was tinged orange, like the last ember of a really good fire. Wendy felt warm all over just looking at it. A tiny ball of light soon resolved into another fairy. Oh, excuse me. She had darker skin than Tinkerbell's, that was orangey red at the tips of her ears, which were a little longer than the other fairies, and more pointed. Her hair was hard to focus on, more foam or spirit than actual strands, a cloud of dark reddish brown that had ribbons dividing it into two big puffs, each side of her head. She wore a simple poncho belted around in the middle, but was hemmed nicely and not ragged like Tinkerbell's. The belt was prettily tooled and had an intricate metal and gem buckle that Wendy desperately wanted a closer look at, with a magnifying glass. Well, I didn't know. I didn't even know you knew the call. If Wendy had expected some sort of intricate fairy fairy greeting ritual. She was more than taken aback by the new fairy's very casual tone. Tinkerbell opened her mouth, and Wendy waited, wincing, for her usual intemperance response. Instead, the fairy took a deep breath. I know the call, sister. I am a fairy. Really, I haven't seen you at any of the mid-season fetes, or the blossom gatherings, or the acorn hunts, or I don't like crowds. You don't seem to like much of what it means to be a fairy. More and more was revealed about Wendy's temperamental little friend. Fairies are apparently gregarious, social creatures like people, or horses, not the lonely, solitary haunters of hills and Icelandic groves Wendy had imagined, who came together for the rare dance around a ring of mushrooms. But Tinkerbell obviously shunned the company of others, like herself, preferring the company of a few giant humans like Peter Pan. I need help. Tinkerbell put her arms in supplication, trying to change the subject. I'll say, I'll say, the fairy retorted with a raised eyebrow. Then, I was hoping this was a friend's invite. I don't usually travel so far into the pernicious forest. It's dangerous. There are criminals around here, you know. I bet you don't even have any nectar or cake to offer a weary fellow traveler, do you? Tinkerbell shook her head amorously, looking at the ground. Wendy started to fumble around in her bag, along with her hastily thrown together belongings. She was sure there was a packet of throat lozenges, maybe a mint pillow or two, and she remembered her main directive, to stay hidden. She couldn't help out her little companion, even if she wanted to. Reluctantly, she settled back down. A third glow appeared around this awkward silence. It zipped along more definitely through the gloom and then stopped into the space next to the two fairies, revealing itself to be a fairy prince. All right, perhaps it was just a fairy male. But either way, when he was thrown, he was devastatingly handsome. He had bark brown skin and high cheekbones and a broad chest, and he sported a neatly folded kilt and sash that did little to cover his sad chest. His head was shorn and his ears were extremely long, tapering to filaments that waved gently as he spoke. A weapon like a sword hung from his waist, hitless and slender and golden. Even at his diminutive size, he radiated confidence, marital skills, and a general calmness that spoke to all the best characteristics of a leader of men or fairies. Uh, it's Tinkerbell. What a surprise. And hello, Berry Lou. He was polite enough to think about, but he bowed to the other girl. It's more than a little dangerous for the three of us to be gathered together here like this. Every criminal in the area will sense our presence. What's the emergency? I don't know. Ask her. Berylune snorted, tilting her head at Tinkerbell. I have to find the first. Have either of you seen them or heard about them lately? Both fairies looked shocked at her question. What was this about? The fairy boy asked seriously. Are you in trouble? Tinkerbell looked a little cagey. No, not me. Who then? Peter Pan has lost his shadow and seeks them out for help. Berylune burst out laughing. The Mare Fairy just looked greatly disappointed. Mindy cringed, feeling like the look was directed at her as well. Well, let the boy to his own fate, he suggested, putting a hand on her shoulder in a brotherly fashion. For how long are you going to keep rescuing and following after that big ugly human? He's not human, Tinkerbell responded angrily, so angrily that she put her hands on her hips and her backside lifted up as her wings buzzed. All right, calm down. He's not exactly human, the boy said soothingly, while giving Berylune an eyeball. But his friends are. Think about if he's such a great, not human traveler, he can take care of himself. And you can come with us to the pink petal harvest. Oh, Berylune, well, squeaked would be the closest approximation to the way she jingled. She spun and grabbed the boy fairy's hands. Me too. Let's be partners. We could even trio if little Miss Boy Wings here will come. As nasty as it sounded, Wendy could tell that Berylune was making a real effort to reach out to Tinkerbell. The offer was genuine despite her tone, whatever it all meant. Tinkerbell shook her head. I have to find Peter. I know where his shadow is. It's with the pirates, and they're planning to destroy all of Neverland. Peter needs to hear about this before he reaches the first and makes some sort of terrible bargain or mistake. And then we'll go after Captain Hook and stop him. Planning to destroy all of Neverland, Berylune sneered. Uh-huh. The fairy boy sighed, shaking his head. It sounds like just another round of games between Peter and the pirates. Alright, Belle. A comrade of mine saw the dismay of the first appear on the northwestern corner of the island, at the base of the Chanting Peninsula, east of the Shimmering Sea. Thank you, Tinkerbell said with relief, and gave him a little bow. Good luck, weirdo, Berylune said with a toss of her head. Guess we'll see you next time you need something, or you finally tire of the company you keep. Shall we? Hand in hand, she and the boy fairy. I keep wanting to say fairy boy. She and the boy fairy rose perfectly in tandem, more gracefully than the most skilled ballerinas. Ballerinas Wendy had ever seen, more smoothly than any ice skaters. And then, just before they disappeared into the depths of the jungle's darkness, as little bobbing glows, the boy fairy turned and winked, directly at Wendy. She fell back, overcome by the direct smiling gaze of the tiny man-at-arms. Strange thoughts popped into her head, shrinking or growing, clinging to a boy as he rode up into the air on the wings, his dragonfly wings beating strongly behind them. Breathless, she staggered out of her hiding place, feeling a trifle disconnect from things. Seeing Tinkerbell knocked sense back into her. The little fairy was hanging in the air like an old toy tied to a string to amuse a baby or a cat, and then forgotten. She twisted a little right and then left as the breeze nudged her. Her gaze was fixed on the disappearing lights of her friends. Poor Tinkerbell. How entirely wrong Wendy had gotten her. What she had thought was fairy affection, artfully ragged dress, tousled hair and a messy bun, snobby and antisocial behavior, was not déreconnant. I don't know, this is some French. I don't know French. For fairies at all. The other two seemed to spend all their time at parties and gatherings. They both had neatly tailored apparel, complete with perfect, high-fashion little accessories. Tink cared less about her appearance than whatever quest she was currently on, whatever fun she was having, whatever the lost boys and Peter were up to, whatever her own mischief involved. Oh yes, Tinkerbell did appreciate the finer things, like her delicate little bedroom, but on her own terms, and most importantly, on her own. She didn't fit in with other fairies, and they obviously had issues with her chosen way of life. No wonder she was so enamored of Peter Pan. She finally had a companion like herself, and of course, she would be jealous and unwilling to share without him. Without him, she might be alone. Tinkerbell, Wendy said softly. The fairy spun around in the air, obviously not having heard her approach. Her eyes were filled with brightness and wet. She shook her head to physically remove any traces of emotion and crossed her arms resolutely. Tinkerbell, Wendy bit her lip. The sort of person who abandoned her extremely cozy people to live a wild life with an unimproved of a boy, a girl who wore tatters and didn't care. Well, she wouldn't be the sort of girl eager to discuss her feelings. She was obviously already embarrassed by what the human girl had witnessed. I feel like we should get started on our way to this enchanted peninsula, shouldn't we? Tinkerbell let out an audible sigh, relieved by the direction Wendy's statement had gone. Chanting, not enchanted. You'll understand when we get there. All right then, let's. And that's when the creature leapt from the bush, grabbing Tinkerbell out of the air. And alright, so we have left off at chapter 18 with Wendy having finally seen some other fairies besides Tinkerbell. And we have left off with Tinkerbell having been caught by some sort of creature that hunts fairies, especially if they appear in groups inside of this forest. As where we will leave off. I have nothing else left to say. I need to go to bed. Drink a whole lot of water. I will see you guys Monday. I might do a reading Sunday night. However, I am not sure. Sounds good. Yeah, there's something I might just. I might. Alright, so thank you guys so very much. And I forgot to do my but my I can't exactly do it because they are prone to howl. But once again, thank you all for and we will do chapters 19 to 21 or something. Whichever one. Bye.